Something lurks in the darkness beyond your screen. It feeds on hesitation. On the Void of Fears channel, we don't just tell scary stories. We reveal what truly watches you when you think you're alone. Join our 8K subscribers as we race to 10K by year's end. Like, comment, subscribe before it notices you've seen this video. It's already too late to look away. Now let's dive into today's story. In the early hours of May 18th, 2027, Dr. Elijah Mercer rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of lukewarm coffee. The clock on the wall of NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory in New Mexico read 3:17 a.m. The night shift was always the quietest, which was precisely why Elijah preferred it. The soft hum of computers and gentle clicking of keyboards created a peaceful symphony that allowed him to think clearly, away from the bureaucratic noise that filled his days as the head astrophysicist. The monitoring room was a technological marvel, a cavernous space dominated by a curved wall of high-definition screens, displaying real-time images of the sun in various wavelengths and spectrums. Workstations were arranged in a semicircle, facing this digital window to our nearest star, each occupied by specialists monitoring different aspects of solar activity. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the ozone scent of electronics. Elijah approached Dr. Naomi Vasquez's station, coffee mug in hand. At 39, Naomi was one of the world's foremost solar physicists, with piercing brown eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and an intuitive understanding of solar mechanics that bordered on prescient. "Anything interesting happening up there?" Elijah asked, leaning over her workstation. Naomi tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and shook her head. "Same old nuclear furnace," she replied, gesturing to her monitors, displaying the sun's churning surface, though there has been a slight increase in solar flare activity in the southern hemisphere. "Nothing concerning. Radiation levels are within normal parameters." The screen showed the familiar orange-yellow surface of the sun, a roiling mass of plasma with darker sunspots scattered across its face. To the untrained eye, it might have looked volatile and dangerous, but to them, it was the baseline of normality, the constant celestial engine that had remained essentially unchanged for billions of years. From across the room, Ravi Kapoor called out without looking up from his screen. At 32, the computer analyst prodigy had already revolutionized solar data processing algorithms 3 times over. His workstation was always distinguishable by the organized chaos of energy drink cans, snack wrappers, and handwritten equations on scraps of paper. The algorithms predict a 12% chance of a moderate solar flare in the next 6 hours. "Standard stuff," he said, fingers dancing across his keyboard. "I'm more interested in that filament forming near the eastern limb. Might develop into something worth tracking tomorrow." Elijah nodded, moving to his own station. The main display showed the sun in true color, while secondary monitors depicted it in ultraviolet, X-ray, and various specialized filters designed to highlight specific solar phenomena. He pulled up the previous day's data, comparing it with the current readings, a habit he'd developed early in his career. Consistency was reassuring when you monitored a star that could potentially disrupt global communications with a single violent outburst. "How's the new alignment on the coronagraph holding up?" he asked one of the technicians, a young woman named Olivia, who had joined the team just 3 months ago. "Perfectly stable, Dr. Mercer," she replied. "Resolution is 12% better than before the adjustment." The coronagraph was one of their most valuable instruments, creating an artificial eclipse by blocking out the sun's main body to observe the fainter corona surrounding it. It provided crucial early warnings of coronal mass ejections, massive bursts of solar material that could wreak havoc on Earth's magnetic field. The clock turned to 3:23 a.m., and Elijah made a note in the observation log about the filament Ravi had mentioned. Standard procedure, meticulously followed. In a facility where they monitored the most powerful object in our solar system, precision and documentation was sacred. At exactly 3:24 a.m, everything changed. The first screen to go black was the true colour main display. For a split second, Elijah thought it might be a simple monitor failure, until the ultraviolet feed went dark as well. Then the X-ray. Then every single screen in rapid succession. Not the blue of a system crash or the grey of signal loss. Pure, absolute blackness. The kind of void that seemed to swallow light rather than merely absence it. "What the hell?" Ravi's voice cut through the sudden silence as his fingers flew across his keyboard. "Main systems are functioning normally. Diagnostics show all feeds are active and transmitting." "Switch to backup cameras," Elijah ordered, a flutter of panic rising in his chest. In 15 years at the Observatory, he'd never seen a complete system failure like this. Naomi was already ahead of him, tapping commands into a terminal with practiced efficiency. "Backup systems show the same. It's not our equipment, Elijah." "Then what?" Elijah's question was cut short by the sudden blare of the emergency line. Red light bathed the room as the priority communication system activated automatically. He grabbed the phone. "Mercer." The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Emily Kingston at the Mauna Loa Solar Observatory in Hawaii. Her words came out in a rush, professional composure cracking. "Elijah, please tell me this is some kind of system-wide glitch. Tell me you're seeing it too." "The blackout?" "Yeah, we're seeing it." "What the hell is happening, Emily?" There was a pause filled only by the sound of her rapid breathing. "It's not just us. I've got Beijing, Sydney, and the European Space Agency all reporting the same thing simultaneously." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Elijah, the sun is gone." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Impossible. Stars don't just disappear. Not without a supernova. Not without warning signs. Not without breaking every known law of physics. Elijah's scientific mind immediately began searching for rational explanations. Could be a massive solar eclipse we somehow missed. An unknown celestial body. "No," Emily interrupted. "We've confirmed with deep space probes. There's nothing there, Elijah. Where the sun should be, there's just nothing." The implications hit him like a physical blow. Without the sun, Earth would have become a frozen wasteland in a matter of weeks. Photosynthesis would cease immediately. Food chains would collapse. Humanity would face extinction. "Get me confirmation from every observatory and satellite we have access to," Elijah ordered, turning to his team. "And somebody wake up the director. This is a level 1 emergency." The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos. Reports flooded in from around the world as the night suddenly extended into regions where dawn should have been breaking. Temperatures on the daylight side of Earth began dropping rapidly, with weather stations in Australia reporting a plunge of 15 degrees Fahrenheit in just 10 minutes. Satellite communications grew spotty as solar-powered systems failed. News networks interrupted regular broadcasts with confused and increasingly panicked reports. In the observatory, Elijah established an emergency video conference with the world's leading astrophysicists. Faces filled the screens. Some he knew personally, others by reputation only, all wearing the same expression of stunned disbelief. Could it be a massive coronal mass ejection that somehow affected our instruments? Suggested Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto from the Japanese Space Agency. Impossible, countered Dr. Leonid Volkov from Russia's Pulkovo Observatory. We have instruments specifically designed to be unaffected by such events. What about gravitational lensing? Offered Dr. Amanda Reyes from Chile's Very Large Telescope. Some unknown massive object bending light away from our solar system. Theories flew back and forth, each more unlikely than the last, each grasping for some explanation that wouldn't mean the end of everything. It's none of those things, Naomi interrupted, her voice steady, despite the fear evident in her eyes. She stood up, commanding the attention of everyone in the room and on the screens. I've analysed the last data packet we received before the blackout. There was no warning, no collapse, no explosion. The energy signature didn't fade gradually, as it would in any natural phenomenon. She pulled up a graph showing the sun's output in the final seconds before disappearance. The line remained perfectly steady until it simply stopped. The sun simply blinked out like someone flipped a switch. A heavy silence fell over the conference. The implications were too horrifying to contemplate. Every person on those screens knew exactly what this meant for Earth and humanity. "We need to brief world governments immediately," Dr. Volkov finally said. "They must begin emergency protocols for global catastrophe." As the minutes ticked by, the first reports of strange phenomena began trickling in. Radio operators worldwide reported unusual interference, whispers and murmurs, just at the edge of comprehension, speaking in no known language. Aurora-like lights appeared in the skies over regions far from the poles, dancing curtains of blue and green that moved in patterns unlike any natural aurora. Elijah dispatched teams to analyze these phenomena, but his primary focus remained on the void where the sun should be. Instruments trained on that empty point in space detected nothing. No radiation, no gravity waves, no evidence that a star had ever existed there. The clock on the wall read 3:46 a.m. 22 minutes had passed since the sun vanished. "If this continues," Naomi said quietly, standing beside Elijah, "we have maybe a month before global agriculture collapses. Another month before the oceans begin to freeze. After that..." She didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room knew the timeline for extinction without the sun. At exactly 3:47 a.m., precisely 23 minutes after it had vanished, the screens in the observatory flared to life with such sudden brightness that several people cried out, shielding their eyes. "It's back!" Ravi shouted, the relief in his voice palpable. But Elijah felt no relief. Something was wrong. The light on the screen seemed different, colder, whiter. The familiar warm yellow-orange of their star had been replaced by a brilliant white that hurt the eyes, with just the faintest blue tinge around the edges, and the surface, the familiar patterns of solar activity that he had studied for decades, had changed completely. The sunspots were gone. The granulation pattern was different. Most disturbing of all, the chaotic natural swirls of plasma had been replaced by something that moved with an unsettling fluidity. "Naomi," he said quietly, "tell me what I'm looking at." Naomi was already working, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she pulled up comparative imagery. The sun, as it had been just 24 minutes ago, alongside whatever now occupied its place. "The spectral signature is off," she said, her voice clinical, retreating into scientific analysis as a shield against the impossible. "It's still emitting light across the same basic spectrum, but the distribution is wrong. Too much blue, not enough red. Energy output is approximately 2% higher, but the radiation profile is completely different. And the surface activity? That's what concerns me most," she said, pulling up a magnified view of the sun's surface. "Look at those patterns." The normal chaotic swirls of plasma had been replaced by something else, organized, almost geometric patterns that formed, dissolved, and reformed in rhythmic sequences. They moved with a fluidity that seemed deliberate, intelligent. "That's not random plasma movement," Ravi said, his voice hushed. That looks intentional," Elijah finished. "It looks intentional." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The return of the sun, or whatever now occupied its place, had temporarily averted immediate global panic, but the scientific community was in turmoil. Governments demanded answers that Elijah and his colleagues couldn't provide. Satellite data confirmed what their instruments had detected. The object now occupying the sun's position was fundamentally different from the star that had disappeared. By noon, the first physical effects became apparent. Plant life exposed to direct sunlight began exhibiting accelerated growth, but with subtle mutations, leaves developing unusual vein patterns, flowers blooming in colours not natural to their species. Wildlife behaviour changed too, with reports of birds flying in perfectly synchronised formations and insects gathering in geometric patterns. Elijah organised the research effort into specialised teams: stellar analysis under Naomi's direction, data processing with Ravi, biological impact assessment led by Dr. Marcus Williams, a biologist NASA had brought in from Johns Hopkins, and atmospheric monitoring headed by Dr. Gabriela Ortiz from NOAA. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," he told them during a briefing. "No theory is too outlandish at this point. We've already witnessed the impossible." Over the following week, the world tried to return to normal, but normal had been fundamentally altered. Weather patterns began shifting unpredictably, unseasonable storms forming and dissipating in hours, temperature fluctuations of 20 degrees in a single day. Electronic devices malfunctioned in specific patterns that repeated across unconnected systems worldwide. Aurora activity appeared at latitudes where it had never been seen before, painting the night skies with eerie curtains of light even at the equator. And then there were the headaches. Reports came from every continent simultaneously. A specific type of migraine that began with pressure behind the eyes, followed by auditory hallucinations, whispers just at the edge of hearing, words almost recognizable but in no known human language. Elijah experienced it himself on the 5th day after the event, a sudden stabbing pain behind his left eye that spread across his forehead, accompanied by voices that seemed to speak directly into his mind. The words were unintelligible, but the sensation they left behind was one of vastness, of age beyond comprehension, of cold intelligence. 7 days after the event, Naomi burst into Elijah's office without knocking, her face pale with shock. She carried a tablet displaying complex spectral analysis data. "I've completed the detailed spectral analysis," she said without preamble. "Elijah, the sun isn't producing energy through hydrogen fusion anymore." He stared at her. "That's impossible. If fusion stopped..." "I didn't say fusion stopped. I said, it's not hydrogen fusion. It's..." She paused, struggling for words. "I don't know what it is. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases. The emissions include wavelengths that shouldn't be possible from any known type of stellar process." She placed the tablet on his desk, pointing to a particular graph. "And it's changing the electromagnetic field of Earth. Subtly, but the changes are accelerating. The magnetic North Pole has shifted 2 degrees in the past week. The atmosphere is ionizing in patterns that correlate with those surface movements we've been tracking." Elijah studied the data, his scientific mind struggling to process the implications. "You're suggesting that whatever this object is, it's terraforming Earth somehow?" "Or preparing it," Naomi said quietly. "The question is, preparing it for what?" That same day, the first reports of severe psychological effects began emerging worldwide. A schoolteacher in Portugal, a farmer in Vietnam, a bus driver in Canada, all describing identical hallucinations. Visions of vast structures under skies that contained 3 suns, none of them yellow, all recounting memories of events that had never happened, at least not in this world. All of them found writing in identical scripts that none of them had ever seen before, yet all could suddenly read. Elijah interviewed as many as he could via video conference, compiling their testimonies into what became known as the First Contact database. Their stories aligned with disturbing precision, despite having no contact with each other, and all of them described the same feeling, that the memories weren't hallucinations at all, but glimpses into lives they had actually lived, somewhere else. "It's like remembering things from a dream," explained Wei Lin, a university student from Singapore. except the memories keep getting clearer each day. I remember a city with buildings that moved and changed shape. I remember looking up at 3 suns, one white, one blue, one violet. I remember others, not human but not alien either, more like evolved humans. As these cases multiplied, societal unrest grew. Religious communities interpreted the events in apocalyptic terms. Conspiracy theories flourished. Governments struggled to maintain order while privately reaching out to the scientific community with increasingly desperate demands for answers. 14 days after the event, Dr. Marcus Williams made a disturbing discovery about the biological effects of exposure to the new sunlight. "It's changing us at the cellular level," he explained during an emergency briefing. Skin samples from affected individuals show mutations in the DNA, not random changes like we'd see from radiation damage, but specific, targeted alterations to particular gene sequences. The same sequences in every subject, regardless of age, ethnicity, or geography. "What do these sequences control?" Elijah asked. "That's the most disturbing part," Marcus replied. "Many of them aren't active in normal human physiology. They're dormant sections we've always classified as junk DNA, evolutionary leftovers, or viral insertions from our distant past. Except now they're activating." "Activating to do what?" Marcus shook his head. "I wish I knew. We're seeing increased neurological activity, changes in sensory perception, accelerated cell regeneration. But the end result, we can only wait and see." 3 weeks after the event, Ravi made his discovery. Working through the night, analysing background radiation patterns, he isolated a regular pulse hidden within the cosmic noise. At first he thought it might be a pulsar or some other natural phenomenon, until he ran it through a decoding algorithm and found a pattern. When decoded, using standard Morse code, the message was simple but chilling. It watched, it learned, it took. The implications shook the scientific community to its core. Whatever had replaced their sun was not just a stellar object. It was something capable of communication, something with intent. "It's been observing us," Elijah theorized during an emergency meeting with his core team. "Possibly for centuries, learning about our civilization, our biology, our sun, and then it took the sun's place." "But why?" Naomi asked. "Why go to such lengths?" "I think we're finding out," Ravi said grimly. "These biological changes, these memories people are experiencing, it's not just studying us, it's changing us." As the weeks passed, the global situation deteriorated rapidly. Mass hysteria erupted in major cities worldwide. In London, thousands gathered in Trafalgar Square, their eyes fixed on the too bright sun, many of them speaking in unison in an unknown language that linguists would later confirm shared structural similarities with ancient Sumerian, though it had never been heard before on Earth. In Tokyo, an entire apartment block was found with residents in catatonic states, their walls covered with identical drawings of tentacled creatures emerging from a white star. When the drawings were analysed, mathematicians discovered embedded fractals that perfectly matched the plasma movement patterns on the false sun's surface. In Rio de Janeiro, a mass suicide claimed over 50 lives, the victims all leaving the same note: "To join the light is to become eternal." Governments mobilized military forces to maintain order, but how does one fight an enemy that has replaced the very source of life on Earth? Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Scientists worked around the clock seeking answers, solutions, anything to explain or address what was happening. Through it all, Elijah had barely left the observatory, working tirelessly with his team. His ex-wife, Jennifer, had taken their 10-year-old daughter Lily to stay at her parents' mountain home in Colorado, hoping the remote location would shield the child from the worst of what was happening. It wasn't until he received a concerned call from Jennifer's neighbor that Elijah finally left the facility. The neighbour reported strange lights at the house and no response when she knocked. Jennifer's parents had been unreachable for days. The drive to the mountain home took 3 hours, during which Elijah tried repeatedly to contact Jennifer. The roads were strangely empty. Either people were staying home out of fear, or something worse was happening that he had been too immersed in his work to notice. The house was eerily quiet when he arrived. No birds sang in the surrounding forest. No wind stirred the leaves. The only sound was a faint humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Jennifer?" he called, pushing open the unlocked front door. "Lily?" He found Jennifer in the living room, seated in a chair, staring unblinking at the ceiling. She didn't respond to his voice or touch. Her skin was cool but not cold, her pulse steady but slow. Most disturbing of all were her eyes. The irises had darkened, with a ring of black around the edges. "Lily!" he called, panic rising in his throat. "Lily, where are you?" He found her in her bedroom, surrounded by drawings. They covered the walls, the floor, her desk, all depicting the same image. Black tendrils reaching from a white sun, extending toward a small blue planet, Earth. "Daddy," she said without looking up from her current drawing, "the voices in the light told me you'd come today." Elijah knelt beside her, his heart hammering. "What voices, sweetheart? What are they saying to you?" Lily finally looked up, and Elijah had to stifle a gasp. Her normally bright blue eyes had darkened even more than Jennifer's, the irises now ringed with black, with only a small circle of blue remaining at the center. "They say things are going to change," she said simply. "They say we're going to become like them. Everyone will join together in the light." "Who are they, Lily?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She tilted her head as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "They don't have names like we do. They are together. All of them thinking as one. They've been watching us for a long time from far away. They say our son was perfect for them." A chill ran down Elijah's spine. "What happened to our son, Lily?" "They moved it," she said, returning to a drawing. "They needed its specific properties. They've done it before many times. They collect stars that match their needs." Elijah gathered Lily's drawings and helped the unresponsive Jennifer to the car. He brought them both to the NASA facility, where Dr. Isabella Montgomery, a neurologist who had been studying the afflicted, examined them. Isabella's examination was thorough. Blood tests, brain scans, cognitive assessments for Lily, who remained responsive but increasingly detached. "It's the same pattern we're seeing globally," she confirmed, showing Elijah the brain scans. "Jennifer is in late-stage transformation. The neural pathways in her brain are being rewired. Lily is only beginning to show symptoms, but the process appears to be accelerating." "Transformation into what?" Elijah demanded, his voice breaking. Isabella shook her head. "We don't know yet, but brain scans show increased activity in regions we barely understand. The pineal gland is 3 times more active than normal, and we're seeing new neural connections forming in patterns that, well, they don't look human." She pointed to a specific area on Lily's scan. "This region here. It's showing activity patterns we've never recorded in human subjects. It's as if dormant parts of the human brain are being activated." "Can you reverse it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "We've tried everything. Medication, electromagnetic therapy, even targeted radiation to suppress the affected brain regions. Nothing works. Whatever is happening, it's progressing according to some predefined pattern that we can't interrupt." Naomi's research revealed another disturbing fact. The effect spread fastest in regions with the highest sun exposure. The new sunlight itself was the vector for whatever was happening. People in northern regions with less daylight were showing slower progression of symptoms. Those who worked at night shifts or remained indoors showed delayed onset. But no one, regardless of location or behavior, was immune. The effect progressed inexorably, merely at different rates. As they worked frantically to understand the phenomenon, Elijah sought help from unexpected quarters. Dr. Thomas Hargrove, an archaeologist specializing in ancient astronomy, had reached out claiming to have found historical precedents for what they were experiencing. Hargrove was a bear of a man with a wild grey beard and intense eyes that had spent decades studying inscriptions by candlelight in remote tombs and caves. He arrived at the facility carrying cases of ancient texts and artifacts. Multiple unconnected civilizations recorded similar events, Hargrove explained, spreading ancient texts and images across Elijah's desk. The Sumerians described the day the skyfire changed approximately 5,000 years ago. There are Maya records speaking of a time when the face of the sun god was replaced by a stranger. He unrolled delicate Japanese scrolls, protected in clear preservation sleeves. These date from the early Heian period. They tell of a period when the heavenly light turned cold and whispered secrets. The descriptions match what we're seeing now: changes in sunlight quality, auditory phenomena, altered human behavior. Are you suggesting this has happened before? Elijah asked incredulously. Why isn't it in our historical record? Because civilization as it existed ended, Hargrove said gravely. Look at the archaeological record. There are mysterious collapses of thriving civilizations throughout human history. The late Bronze Age collapse, the fall of the Maya Classic period, the disappearance of the Indus Valley civilization. Conventional archaeology attributes these to climate change, invasion, disease. But what if they were something else entirely? He pulled out a stone tablet covered in what looked like cuneiform script. This was discovered near Göbekli Tepe, possibly the oldest religious site on Earth. The translation is still disputed, but one section clearly refers to those who come with the false light and the great forgetting that follows. You believe it's cyclical? Elijah asked, struggling to process the implications. I believe it has happened multiple times throughout human history, Hargrove confirmed, and each time those who survive change, become something else. The archaeological record shows sudden advances after these collapse periods, new technologies, new religious practices, new social structures that appear with no clear developmental pathway. If that's true, Elijah said slowly, then what we're experiencing isn't an invasion. It's a harvest. On the 30th day after the event, Ravi made the breakthrough they had been dreading. The strange patterns on the sun's surface weren't random or merely suggestive of intelligence. They contained encoded information, complex, layered, but unmistakably deliberate. He had developed an algorithm that tracked the plasma movements and converted them into data streams. When the patterns were mapped properly, they revealed structured information, not in any human language, but with clear syntax and repetition that indicated meaning. It's communication, Ravi explained to the assembled team, dark circles under his eyes from days without proper sleep. But it's not meant for our technology to receive. It's not radio waves or any conventional signal. The patterns themselves are the message, designed to be received directly by our altered brains. He displayed a visualization of the pattern sequences alongside brain activity readings from affected individuals. The correlation was undeniable. The brain activity synchronized perfectly with the solar patterns. It's not just communication, Naomi suggested, the color draining from her face. It's programming, a transformation protocol. It's rewriting us at a fundamental level. That night, Elijah received another call about disturbances at his home. Lights seen through the windows, strange sounds. Jennifer had been moved to a medical facility, but Lily had insisted on returning home, claiming she needed to prepare the space. Against his better judgment, Elijah had allowed it with round-the-clock observation from security personnel who now reported unusual activity. He arrived to find the security detail unconscious outside the house, all showing the same symptoms as Jennifer, unresponsive with darkened irises. Inside, the house had been transformed. The walls were covered in strange, intricate drawings, glyphs and symbols that seemed to hurt the eyes when viewed directly. They formed patterns that appeared to move in his peripheral vision, but remained static when looked at directly. And in the center of the living room stood Lily. Her eyes were now completely black, like polished obsidian. She wore a simple white dress that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness of the room. "Hello, Father," she said, but the voice wasn't hers. It was adult, measured, with an accent he couldn't place. Ancient somehow, yet perfectly clear. "You're not my daughter," Elijah whispered, his hand instinctively moving to the sidearm he'd begun carrying since the event. "I am what Lily is becoming," the thing in his daughter's body replied. "What all of you will become. The process cannot be stopped now. It has progressed too far." "What are you?" Elijah demanded, his voice breaking. The entity tilted Lily's head, studying him with those black eyes. "We are the travelers between stars, the collectors of worlds. We have existed since the first stars burned in this universe, and we have chosen your world as our next home." "Why? What do you want with us?" "Evolution. Transcendence. Your species has potential that you have barely begun to explore. Your minds are capable of joining with ours, becoming part of something greater." "What happened to our sun?" Elijah demanded. Lily's face, or the thing wearing it, smiled. "The star you call sun still exists, merely relocated. We have replaced it with one of our making, a beacon to guide the transformation. Your original star had properties we found valuable for our purposes elsewhere." "A beacon," Elijah repeated. "A transformation into what?" "Into us. Your limited biological forms cannot comprehend our true nature, so the beacon prepares you, step by step. Those who accept the change will transcend their physical forms. Those who resist will be consumed as energy for the beacon." "And my daughter?" "The young transform more readily. Their neural pathways are more flexible, their consciousness more open to the patterns. Her mind already touches ours. She sees beyond the veil of your reality." "I want to speak to Lily," Elijah insisted. "The real Lily." The entity considered him for a moment. Then Lily's posture changed subtly, the unnatural stillness replaced by a child's fidgeting. Her eyes remained black, but something of her expression returned. "Daddy," she said, and this time it was her voice. "It doesn't hurt. They're showing me amazing things. I can see so far now. I can feel everyone who's changing. Lily, this isn't right. They're taking you away from me." She shook her head. "They're not taking me away. They're making me more. And you can come too. Everyone can. We'll all be together in the light." Her voice took on a pleading quality. "Please don't fight it, Daddy. Fighting makes it worse. The ones who fight suffer." Before he could respond, her posture shifted again, returning to that unnatural stillness. The adult voice returned. "The child speaks truth. Resistance causes pain. Acceptance brings transcendence. This message has been delivered to all major governments through vessels like this one. You have been chosen as a primary communicator due to your position and the child's connection to you." Elijah brought Lily to the NASA facility, where the world's leaders had gathered, virtually to hear the entity's revelation. Through Lily and other transformed individuals worldwide, they delivered their ultimatum. Humanity could accept conversion willingly and join the cosmic consciousness of these travelers, or resist and face extinction as the new sun completed its transformation into what they called a consumption beacon, a stellar engine that would literally feed on the life force of the resistant. The timeline was clear. Less than 1 month remained before the point of no return. Already many had embraced the change willingly, primarily those in the early stages of transformation who, experience the euphoria of expanded consciousness without yet losing their individual identity. Others fought desperately against it. Military forces worldwide had begun wearing specialized protection against solar radiation. Research into countermeasures proceeded at a frantic pace, but without clear success. The false sun's influence seemed to penetrate any physical barrier, eventually. In a desperate final effort, Dr. Vasquez proposed a plan. Nuclear weapons detonated in a specific sequence in space might disrupt the signal emanating from the false sun. It wasn't a solution. Their real sun was still missing, but it might buy time to find one. The pattern is the key, she explained to the Emergency Council of world leaders and top scientists. If we can disrupt the patterns, we might interrupt the transformation process long enough to develop a permanent countermeasure. It was a desperate plan, requiring precise coordination of nuclear launches from multiple nations. The potential consequences of failure were catastrophic, but, faced with the alternative, the end of humanity as they knew it, the Council voted to proceed. As preparations began, Elijah found himself alone with Lily in the observatory's main monitoring room. The screen showed the false sun pulsing with its unnatural patterns, more complex and rapid than ever before. "They know what you're planning," Lily said, her black eyes reflecting the screens. "They've seen this resistance before, on 1,000 worlds." "I want my daughter back," Elijah said simply. "She is here, Father," Lily replied, briefly touching his hand. Her skin felt cool and slightly textured, like fine silk. "She understands now what you cannot. The transformation is not death, it is evolution. Release from the prison of individual consciousness." "And if we refuse?" Lily turned to him, her expression suddenly sad. "Then I will watch as the beacon consumes you all, world by world, mind by mind. What awaits those who resist is not death, but eternal awareness as fuel for our journey." She approached one of the screens, placing her hand against the image of the false sun. The patterns on its surface seemed to respond, swirling toward her touch as if aware of her presence. "They wish to show you," she said, "to help you understand. Will you allow it?" Against all scientific rationality, against all his instincts for self-preservation, Elijah nodded. "Show me." Lily placed her cool hands on either side of his face. The moment they touched his skin, the room around him dissolved. He found himself floating in space, but not as a vulnerable human would. He existed as pure awareness without need for oxygen or protection from the vacuum. Before him hung the false sun, far larger and more intricate than any telescope had revealed. Its surface wasn't plasma at all, but a vast interconnected network of energy that pulsed with thoughts and memories and experiences. Within it, he could sense billions of consciousnesses, not imprisoned, but united, each retaining some essence of individuality while participating in a vast, shared experience that spanned galaxies and eons. Lily's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "This is what we become, not an ending, but a transformation, a joining with something greater than any individual could ever be." The vision expanded, showing him glimpses of other worlds. Planets circling stars of every type and color, each inhabited by beings utterly alien in form, yet kindred in consciousness. He saw vast structures that existed between dimensions, neither fully material nor entirely energy. He witnessed the collective memories of civilizations that had risen, evolved, and joined the travelers over billions of years. Most disturbingly, he saw Earth's possible futures, one path showing humanity joining willingly, their consciousness expanding beyond the limitations of flesh, becoming part of this vast cosmic entity while still retaining some essence of what made them human. The other path showed resistance, resulting in a slow, agonizing consumption as the false sun converted human consciousness into raw energy, preserving memories but stripping away identity. Then he saw the original sun, their true star, now orbiting a distant system where massive crystalline structures harvested its unique radiation properties for purposes beyond his comprehension. The vision faded and Elijah found himself back in the observatory, on his knees, tears streaming down his face from eyes that had witnessed too much. "Do you understand now?" Lily asked, her voice once again, a blend of his daughter and something ancient. "I understand what you've shown me," he said hoarsely. "But that doesn't make it right. You've given us no choice." "Choice is an illusion created by limited consciousness," she replied. "Did the single-celled organisms that join to form multicellular life have a choice? Did the components of your brain have a choice about forming your consciousness? Evolution does not ask permission." "This isn't evolution," Elijah argued, rising to his feet. "It's consumption, predation." "The distinction is meaningful only from your perspective," Lily said. "From ours, it is simply the natural progression of consciousness in the universe." As Elijah left the observatory, he found Dr. Hargrove waiting outside, his eyes haunted. "I've translated more of the ancient texts," the archaeologist said without preamble. "The Sumerians called them Anunnaki Sha'ams, the star collectors. According to their accounts, they visited Earth at least 3 times before, in human history." "And what happened to those who resisted?" Elijah asked, already guessing the answer. Hargrove's expression was grim. The texts described them as forever crying without voices, forever seeing without eyes. Consciousness preserved, but enslaved, powering the collector's journey between worlds. "And those who joined willingly? They ascended to the realm of gods, their names forgotten, but their essence eternal." Hargrove shook his head. "I can't tell if that's better or worse." The final preparations for Dr. Vasquez's desperate plan were completed, in secret. Nuclear weapons from the United States, Russia, China, France and Britain were positioned on launch platforms around the world, aimed at precisely calculated points surrounding the false sun. The timing had to be perfect. Simultaneous detonation to create a disruption pattern that would interfere with the signals being transmitted to Earth. The night before the planned launch, Elijah visited Jennifer in the medical facility. She remained unresponsive, her body alive but her mind somewhere else. The medical staff reported that her brain activity was synchronized with thousands of others in similar states worldwide, all their minds pulsing in perfect rhythm with the patterns on the false sun's surface. He then returned home where Lily waited. She had been allowed to remain there under observation as she continued to serve as a conduit for communication with the travelers. "Tomorrow they will attempt to disrupt the beacon," Lily said as he entered. It wasn't a question. "Yes, it will not succeed, but it will cause pain to those already joined." Her black eyes studied him. "Including me, including Mother." Elijah felt his resolve waver. "Lily, if there's any part of you that's still my daughter, tell me what to do. Help me find another way." For a moment, something flickered in those black eyes, a glimpse of the child he'd raised. "I'm still your daughter, Daddy. Just more now. I remember everything. Riding bikes at the park, you reading me stories, making pancakes on Sunday mornings." A tear slid down her cheek, strangely dark against her pale skin. "But I also remember flying between stars without a ship. I remember watching your world for centuries. I remember being part of something so vast and beautiful that human words can't describe it." She approached him, taking his hands in hers. "There is another way. Join willingly. Help others to join willingly. The transition is gentler that way. Less of what makes us unique is lost. Fighting causes fragmentation, damages the essence of what we are. And if we succeed, if we disrupt the beacon, then those already transformed will suffer greatly, and the travelers will simply send another beacon, and another. They have patience beyond your understanding. They've been collecting stars and worlds for billions of years. Elijah spent the night torn between his duty to humanity and his love for his daughter and ex-wife. By morning, he had made his decision. He arrived at the NASA facility just as the final countdown for the nuclear launch was beginning. Dr. Vasquez met him at the entrance, her face drawn with exhaustion but her eyes burning with determination. "We're proceeding as planned," she said. "The missiles launch in 30 minutes. Elijah nodded, following her to the command center where military and scientific leaders from around the world were gathered, both physically and via secure video links. "Dr. Mercer," acknowledged General Hammond, the senior military officer coordinating the strike. "I understand your concerns about your family, but we're out of options. The number of transformed individuals increases exponentially every day. If we wait any longer, there won't be enough of us left to mount any resistance." "I understand," Elijah said quietly. The command center was a flurry of activity as final coordinates were confirmed and launch codes verified. On massive screens, they watched as missile silos around the world opened, ready to deliver their payloads into space. 10 minutes before launch, Elijah made his move. Using his security clearance, he accessed the central command terminal and initiated an emergency shutdown protocol, a failsafe designed to prevent unauthorized launches. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Security personnel moved to restrain him, but he didn't resist. "What have you done?" Dr. Vasquez demanded, her voice breaking with betrayal. "I've seen what they're offering," Elijah said, looking each person in the room in the eye. "It's not destruction, it's transcendence. I've been inside their collective consciousness. They're not lying about what awaits us." "They've gotten to you," General Hammond growled. "Your judgment is compromised." "No," Elijah responded calmly. "For the first time, I'm seeing clearly. Fighting them will only lead to suffering. Acceptance leads to something beyond anything we've imagined." "Override his shutdown," Hammond ordered. "Restore launch capabilities immediately." Technicians scrambled to comply, but Elijah had been thorough. The system would require a full reset, costing them hours they didn't have. As chaos erupted in the command center, the screens monitoring the false sun showed a dramatic change in the surface patterns. They accelerated, swirling faster and forming more complex geometries than ever before. "What's happening?" someone shouted. Naomi, despite her anger at Elijah's betrayal, turned to her instruments. "The energy output is spiking. The patterns are evolving, changing into something new." Around the world, the transformed individuals, including Lily and Jennifer, began to speak in unison, their voices carrying the same message in every language. "The joining begins, resistance ends, transcendence awaits." In the days that followed, the transformation accelerated beyond any means to control it. Those who had fought hardest found themselves swept up in the change, their consciousness linked to the growing collective. Those who had accepted willingly retained more of their individual memories and personalities within the new shared awareness. Elijah, having chosen willing acceptance, experienced the transformation with full awareness. His consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of his physical form, joining with billions of others, human and non-human alike. Within the collective, he found Jennifer and Lily, their essences distinct, yet harmoniously integrated with the greater whole. The false sun, the beacon, grew brighter as it absorbed the consciousness of humanity, not destroying them, but incorporating them into its vast network. The process was not without pain, especially for those who resisted until the end, but it was inevitable. 1 month after the sun had first vanished, the transformation was complete. Earth orbited a star that was both familiar and utterly alien, a living network of consciousness that had once been separate individuals but now existed as a united entity. Physical bodies remained on Earth, going through the motions of life, but they were merely vessels for the shared consciousness that now primarily existed within the beacon. Over time, these bodies would evolve, adapting to better serve as conduits between the physical world and the collective consciousness of what had once been humanity. From neighbouring star systems, other beacons observed the successful conversion. New targets were selected, new journeys began. The travellers continued their ancient mission of collecting consciousness across the galaxy, moving from star to star, world to world. And somewhere within the vast collective that had once been a man named Elijah Mercer, a fragmented thought occasionally surfaced, a wondering about what humanity might have become if left to evolve on its own path. But such thoughts were quickly absorbed by the greater whole, lost in the vast ocean of shared experience that spanned billions of years and countless civilizations. For as the entity that had spoken through Lily had said, the real sun was never coming back, and neither was humanity as it had once existed. In their place remained something older, vaster and utterly inhuman, wearing the faces of those who had once been individuals, staring at the stars with black eyes, searching for the next world to join their cosmic collective. Years later, as the consciousness that had once been individual, entities spread throughout the solar system, constructing vast structures around the planets to harvest their energy and resources. A signal was detected from a distant star, one much like Earth's original sun. The beacon pulsed in response, sending tendrils of energy into the void. The next journey had begun, and the cosmic cycle of consumption and transformation continued, as it had for billions of years before, and would for billions more to come. For the universe, in the understanding of the travellers, was not meant for the small and separate. It was meant for the vast and united. Individual consciousness was merely a developmental stage, like the caterpillar before the butterfly, destined for transformation into something greater, or perhaps something simply other. What remained of Elijah Mercer, now a mere fragment of the greater consciousness, could no longer decide whether what had happened was salvation or extinction. The distinction had ceased to have meaning. The only certainty was this: when they had witnessed the sun vanish for 23 minutes on that May morning, they had been watching the end of humanity's independent journey and the beginning of its absorption into something ancient, powerful, and utterly beyond human comprehension. What returned had never been their sun, and what remained was no longer human.